Hey, 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 welcome to another episode of Trends Talk. I am your host, Sarah Sladek, the CEO and founder of XYZ University. And today we're going to talk about workforce and leadership trends. And let's be honest, things are chaotic and crazy in the workforce right now. And we're seeing whole new generations move into leadership, and we're seeing a whole demand and push for things like hybrid and remote and virtual, and needing retention and engaging younger generations and training people faster. And wow, it's a lot. So we're going to talk about that today. And I'm so excited to be joined by Camille Sanders. Camille is a storyteller. She is a strategist. She is a entrepreneur, an executive, a volunteer, a podcaster. Oh my gosh, she does so many things. But the point is, I invited Camille to be here today because she has had a leading role for so many organizations on this topic of leadership development, workforce development, career strategies. So, Camille, please join me and let's get this party started. Woo-hoo. All right, so we're going to start with round one. Here we go. Let's put the question on the screen. So, Camille, what current stat or data point best summarizes the need for organizations to prioritize workforce and leadership development right now?
I think the workforce trend that I would look to around summarizing the need for prioritizing workforce development probably comes from the World Economic Forum, or WEF for short. They recently did a study on how the workforce will change over the next several years. And they are predicting that about 42% of business tasks and up to 65% of information and processing jobs are moving toward automation in 2027. And that's just one of the stats, but I think it is some real clear insight into just how quickly things are going to evolve across a lot of industries. And so I think if there's anything that I would say sort of is the alarm bell wake up call for us, that would be among the stats. Things are changing and fast.
Wow. So it makes you think of just, AI taking over. It reminds me of that movie. Okay, I'm going to date myself saying this, but Minority Report, the Minority Report, Tom Cruise is in it. It's kind of when AI took over.
Yeah.
And it can be kind of scary to think about. But I mean, there are pros and cons, right? It opens up the opportunity for us to be more creative and have more freedom to innovate and use our brains in different ways potentially. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. I think AI is great. What a lot of people I think don't realize as much is that we've been using AI for quite some time. It's not this mystical, strange thing that we don't know about. You know, if you have an iPhone and you use Siri, you've been using AI. That's an AI feature. If you have Alexa in your home, you're using AI. So I think what we're seeing now is that we've been using it in our personal lives, and now we're starting to see a bit of a transition where it's coming to bear in the workforce. And that's frightening for people because, let's face it, change is often frightening for people. But I don't think it's anything to be afraid of. I think that we can't ignore it, that we have to be motivated to get on board, to learn the technology, to learn how to work with it well. And I think if you're one of those people that adapts to the technology instead of being afraid of it, you will thrive. And there's nothing to be afraid of.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I appreciate that, Camille, because I feel sometimes like I'm a dinosaur. Even though I like next gen things and trend things, I feel like this is one area that I'm like, oh my gosh. But you're absolutely right. We have been using it for quite a while, and younger generations are going to be really used to it. So, okay, let's go to round two, question two. Okay, so 5 years from now, man, when you think about how much has changed in the last 5 years, it's been
Yeah.
exponential, right? So 5 years from now, what are your predictions? How do you think our workforce is going to be different?
That's a great question. And I think there are several things, Sarah. I think hopefully a critical need will have been met, and we will see our global workforce really have start to have been upskilled or reskilled. Right now, across all industries, there is about a 20 to 30% critical talent gap. And that's every industry's facing that. And what I mean when I say a critical talent gap, I mean that there is a limited supply of people with the skills that would be considered essential to a business's performance in that particular industry. So 20 to 30% is nothing to sneeze at, right? That's pretty significant. And so if we think about the fact that that's happening across all industries, we have to see upskilling and reskilling as a priority within the next 5 years. Also, as you mentioned, I think you were spot on earlier. You talked about AI and automation. I think we're going to see an even greater use of that, which dovetails with the fast paced developments that we're seeing in technology around both of these things. So I think that's only going to accelerate. Then, thirdly, I'd say we will also see critical skills for workers begin to shift a bit. And as I mentioned, things like AI and data are going to be prevalent, but also we're going to see opportunities abound, I think, for workers who are adept at what we like to call essential skills, right? This is not the technical part of your job. So if you're an accountant, we're not talking about making you better at accounting, right? We're talking about the other things that make you better at leading and working in business, those soft skills like being able to collaborate well with others, your communication skills, your critical thinking skills, and even creativity in thinking. Those are the things that businesses are going to be looking for. And then also, finally, I'd say, I think we're going to see more flexibility in how people are working. And what I mean by that is remote and hybrid work and also side gig work. Those are all things that have really evolved rapidly within the past 5 years or so. And they're here to stay, right? Whether you love it, you hate it, whatever, they're here to stay. It's become a norm for many workers. And I think employers who want to gain and retain really highly qualified talent are going to have to be very intentional about thinking about and implementing what they're comfortable with in terms of flexibility and also working with their workforce to make their organization a competitive place to work.
Hmm. Holy cow, there was a whole bunch packed into there. I feel like
Yeah.
we could talk about each of those topics for hours, right?
Yeah.
Um, but let's just go back for just a second because you had a really interesting stat there about critical gaps.
Yeah.
And is that, would you say that is because of technology that that's kind of fostered and fueled because things are changing so quickly and our skills aren't keeping pace? Or what would you credit that gap to?
I think technology is certainly a part of that, right? The systems that we use to achieve different uh, ends in our organizations change and they evolve. If you think about it in terms of marketing, for example, marketers used to, have to put together manually different emails and send them out, one by one.
Yeah.
Now you have marketing automation systems where you can set up a whole series of messaging and sort of nurture people through a specific journey. And you do a lot of work on the back end so that you're able to save time down the road. So I think things like that have certainly evolved. And there is some learning curve for the workforce where you do have to adapt to that technology. But I think also it's internally businesses really having to stay on top of making sure that as those changes occur, they are doing what is necessary to move their people forward, right? How many times have we worked for organizations that have implemented a new software or a new process, and not everybody was trained on it, right? Some people get the training, other people don't. That begins to create a gap. Right. And so I think there's really some intentionality that has to happen within businesses operationally to make sure that we're moving people along and keeping folks up to date on the things that they need to know.
Yeah, so that means more training, more learning, and you mentioned soft skills as well, like, learning things like conflict resolution and negotiation. And it's real interesting as we take away some of those tasks that now AI is filling in, it kind of brings to light where we have these fissures in our actual human development and ability to be effective leaders. And what something I always talk about is that we're actually having to learn how to team build and lead effectively in a time of disruption. But really, in the past, everything was so hierarchical and you followed a path. We've not really had to learn how to be a team or team build or, be effective at communicating with the team. It was more like just do your job. Here are the rules. Listen to the boss type of thing.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
No, I think you're spot on. I couldn't have articulated that better. I think that, that is a dated approach to management and leadership, right? And I think that it is evolving. Some organizations have come along and seen the winds of change blowing and evolved as such, and then others are sort of having to be drug along into the change to change some of those things. But I
Right.
think that's the way that people want to work now, right? They want
Yeah.
to feel invested in
Mhm.
the organization. They want to feel as though they have a voice and that they can. They're doing the work. They want to feel a part of the work and to have a voice in the outcomes and the future of work. And I think, again, that's something that we're only going to see increase as time moves on. I think, you're right. Like within maybe the last 5 to 7 years, we've seen that expand, I think more so than in past times when things were very hierarchical. But it's going to continue.
Yeah. All right. We're stirring it up. Hopefully, people are not freaking out. It's going to be okay. We're going to get to more
Yes.
solutions here in
Yes.
just a moment. But round three, we're on three. Here we go. How is a younger workforce majority influencing leadership and workplace cultures? So, for those of you who are tuning in, as of 2015, so it's not new, but you're still adapting to the fact that millennials became the workforce majority. And for the first time in a long time, our workforce is now trending younger. And that's introducing all kinds of change. So, Camille, what is changing? How is it going to continue to change?
Well, I think what's unique about this time, Sarah, is that for the first time in history, which is major, first time in history, we have 5 generations that are in the workforce at the same time.
Yep.
And, we're talking Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, and we still also have some folks from the silent generation who are still working. People are working longer these days. And as you mentioned, millennials who are now between the ages of 26 and 41
Mhm.
are leading in terms of how many participants they have in the workforce. And so you're talking about, if we're talking millennials, that's about 50 million or so full time workers that are in the workforce right now. So they're leading, followed by Gen X. And I think we are certainly seeing this trend impact the workforce in the sense that a lot of, and this is my opinion, but a lot of the changes I think that we've seen over the past 5 to 7 years in terms of flexibility, a focus on well being, a focus on mental health, and a willingness to really openly discuss those things more in a way that did not occur in previous generations is a direct impact in a result of the influence of millennials and in some instances, excuse me, those late Gen Xers. And so I think we're going to see the influence and the voices of younger workers continuing to grow, especially as Gen Z begins to come into the workforce. They're going to have different values and different needs that might be expressed differently. So I think that it's going to be an evolution, and it's going to be continual, as it should be, right? It shouldn't, the workforce should not stay static. As different generations join, we're going to see those changes. There's going to be an evolution. It's nothing to be afraid of. It should continue to evolve.
Yeah, definitely. I was just having a conversation with a Gen Xer, which I am Gen X. So, but it was interesting because he was saying he recently was onboarding some folks to his team that were Gen Z and some really young millennials, and he was just kind of blown away by number one, being held accountable by them, using their voice, speaking up, asking lots of questions, kind of pushing back. And his feathers were ruffled a little bit. He was like, "Gosh, I don't know if I like this." And it's like, "Oh my gosh, come on, Gen X. We didn't like it when we didn't have a voice, and now let's not continue that negative trend in our leadership roles." But it is interesting. Young people are using their voices more. They've been raised with social media. We saw parenting shifts. Young people have more of a voice at an earlier age. They're encouraged to share their opinions. Thoughts on that, Camille?
I love it. I mean, I myself am a what I call a zennial.
Mm.
I saw somebody drop that into the chat, so shout out to that. We're those folks who are right on the cusp of, like, we're right on the cusp of Gen X and millennial. Um, Shout
Mhm.
out to the zennials out there, right? So we sort of straddle both worlds, I think, with Gen X in terms of the more traditional view of the workforce, but also like millennials, we came up comfortable with technology and a little more comfortable with using our voices and being vocal about our needs and our wants in the workplace. And so I sort of identify with both worlds in that way. And I like it. I think it has been very positive. If you ask me, I think that we saw this even if you think back to the 60s and the flower child movement and the 70s, and sort of the power movements and all that. There's always been some kind of movement. There's always been a voice that generations have had, and things have changed so rapidly around technology. Those voices are not expressed now in the same way that they were back then, but they still need to be heard, and they need to be heard even in the workplace, right? Because some theorists say, as so business goes, the culture goes, right? And if that is true, right, we need people who are willing to affect change, positive change in the workplace. And I think that if we are a people who are going to be innovative and stay cutting edge, we can't be afraid of that, right? We've got to kind of just, I hate to say this so bluntly, but I'm going to just get over ourselves, right? Like, we all feel it. Nobody likes feeling challenged or like their authorities necessarily being questioned. But you've got to figure out what it is on the inside of you that is triggering around that,
Yeah.
and sort of work that out. That's not your employees to work out. Like, that's not for your employees or your peers to work out. That's an internal job. And I think the more leaders that we see realize that and work on that through coaching, through therapy, through whatever means that they need to, I think there's going to be some positive impact and change that we see in the workplace as a result.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, we have to remember that a good leadership trait is the ability to learn as well as to teach. And I think having that humility is so incredibly important. Okay, we have questions coming in, but let's go to round four before we get to some of those audience questions. So, Camille, you're kind of the expert on this. So I'm curious, what 3 steps, if you had to give organizations 3 steps, how do we start to prioritize this workforce development? It can seem really overwhelming. what are the first three things you would urge organizations to do?
Oh, this is fun. This is a fun one. I love it. Thank you so much for this question. I think the first thing is that organizations have to decide that workforce development is going to be a priority. That is really the first step, right? Is deciding it's a priority. There's a lot of talk about workforce development in business, in different industries, in different arenas, but making a commitment to it, to support it in your strategic plan, is really the first step, I think. Then secondly, you have to put resources behind it, right? Like it's nothing happens in businesses or associations or any type of business without resources. And what do I mean when I say resources? I'm talking staffing, I'm talking allocation in your budget, I'm talking about leadership support. All of that is critical to moving any workforce initiative forward. And then thirdly, I think creating actionable resourced strategies. And you'll note that I've used the word resource over and over again because it's important, right? And I'll just speak for associations because that's the industry that I work in. Workforce development for associations is really twofold in my view. I think it's internal, right, which is the association needing to figure out internally what they need to do to improve their workforce and to develop their workforce. And that's going to happen with HR and senior leadership with feedback and buy-in from all staffing levels, right? So that has to be a priority, I think, for organizations because we can't be the people in glass houses, right? That's telling everybody else what to do and we're not taking care of what we need to. So I think that's important. The other part of it is external, right? Helping the industries that our associations or our organizations represent develop their workforce. And we go about that in terms of creating actionable resource strategies by identifying opportunities and pain points, gathering and disseminating the necessary data and information, and then helping our members create actionable and resource strategies based on that.
That's fantastic. So, yeah, prioritize and actually put resources behind it.
Yes,
So
yes.
incredibly important. A lot of times we hear, and I think it's just a good reminder because we'll hear organizations say, "Well, we want this," or "We know it's a need," but they don't really take the extra step to act upon it. So it sounds like that's what you're urging organizations to do.
Absolutely.
All right. So before I go to Q5, I want to just address a couple of these questions. We'll do a little speed round here that have come in the chat. All right. So from Dwayne, how can one do their main job and do side gig without losing their job for compliance and security reasons? So just a very specific question.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Thanks for raising it because I have actually had some friends who are leaders in their organizations bring similar questions to me and say, "Oh, this employee of mine is working a side gig, and I don't know how to feel about that." And I
Hmm.
think we are in a time where inflation and the economy are real concerns for people. And yes, you could, as an employer, say to someone, I pay you a salary, work your day job. That's it. That's all I expect. And some do. But it's worth noting that, most people are working side gigs. And I think if are an employee who is doing that, I think the thing to do is just make sure that you are making the main thing the main thing. So don't work on your side gig when you're on the clock for your employer, right? That's just bottom line. Don't cheat your employer out of their time. I think if you are doing side gig work and it's something like consulting or where you're working maybe with, another business entity, you have to really be clear about expectations and let them know that you do have a day job and this is maybe a passion for you that you're working on the side. So you'll be available in evenings and on weekends. And if they really want to work with you, they'll be able to adapt to that. And I think that they'll respect it, right? Because I'm sure sure that that organization has employees that they don't want working other things on their time. So I think
Right.
just being transparent and honest and making sure that your employer does not have um, any issue in terms of conflicting interests. So some organizations have required employees to sign a non-compete, although the FTC's made some moves around that, right? That has recently been struck down, but I think we're going to see some court challenges around that. So non-competes are not necessarily as valid as they have been in the past, given the recent actions over the past 6 months by the government. So we'll see some evolution there, but make sure that you're covering all your bases. Let your human resources department know if you're worried about it, that you have a side gig and you just want to make sure that it's not going to compromise your full-time job. And then make sure that they know that you are not doing this on their time. It's in your evenings, your weekends, which is your time, and that also you're not doing it for an organization that is in direct competition with them in any way. That is very, very important.
Excellent advice. So let's do like 1 minute to answer this one. This one came from LinkedIn. If I'm looking at my own skills bank, what are 2 to 3 skills I need to be most successful for the workforce of the future?
Mm. Yeah, I love that question. I think preparing yourself, staying up to speed on technology, and also making sure that you're developing your soft skills, getting those opportunities in. And how do you do that? Like if I'm just being practical, you may say, okay, that's a nice big overarching goal, right? But how do I do it? Well, I think there are plenty of ways to make sure that you're staying up to date on your skills. There are things like LinkedIn Learning. There are Coursera, there's uh, Udemy, if I'm saying that
Masterclass.
right. Yeah,
Yep.
Masterclass. Like there are tons of different platforms
Hmm.
that you can go on and just stay up to date on technical, practical skills that will make you better at your job across most industries. But then in terms of your soft skills, I think looking for those leadership development programs. I will give a shout out to my former employer, ASAE, the American Society of Association Executives. They have a really great program called Ready Me that focuses on leadership development and really a focus on soft skills, right? Essential skills, things like developing people in a way that helps you be more collaborative and improves communication and things like that. But they're not the only game in town. There are lots of other leadership development programs that you can look into. And also on your job, look for those opportunities to cross collaborate with other teams and talk to your supervisor about, how you can enhance your performance. Are there opportunities for you to serve on work groups internally
Right.
that would show leadership and that help you develop your skills around collaboration and communication? Look for those opportunities. Don't shy away from them. As long as you can successfully still manage your workload, be open to those opportunities that will help you stand out as a leader.
Oh, Camille, you're such an amazing career mentor, right, people? Okay, let's go to Q5. We only have a couple minutes left, but this is an important one. What trends are you, because it is trends talk. So, what trends are you currently watching and advising others to prepare for, Camille?
Yeah, I think we've talked about a lot of them that I'm watching. I am very much watching this evolution of technology and the impact that it's going to have on the workforce. I am myself getting more comfortable with AI and automation and finding ways to weave that into my everyday job so that I'm prepared, right? I did some online learning. I learned how to use Chat GPT. I'm a marketer by trade. So I already knew a lot about like marketing automation and different automation functions and features. So I'm comfortable in that space. But AI, I'm getting more comfortable in using it, for things like taking notes in my meetings and prompts to help make things easier for some of the administrative, the grueling things that we all hate to do. How can I use AI to help with some of that? So
Right.
I'm doing those things myself, and I would encourage other people to do them as well. So I think those are trends that I'm watching. I'm also watching, frankly, how the generations are interacting in the workforce together, the shifts in that. I think you
Mhm.
can see it a lot in work groups in different organizations, and how people think, how they draw conclusions, how they come to the table and collaborate with each other. It's very intriguing to watch that across generations and different specialties and career levels. So that's also something that I'm watching very closely.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Camille, for being on Trends Talk. This was a great show. And thanks to our audience for tuning in and asking some great questions. Hopefully, you have a new perspective now and some tools to move forward with in terms of workforce development, leadership development, career strategies, all good things. Thank you, Camille. It was
Thank
amazing. And I'm Sarah Sladek. If you enjoyed Trends Talk, tune in next month. We're going to have Cenk Oz, who is named at 12 years old the youngest CEO in Britain. He's now 18. He has a thriving company. We're going to be talking about Gen Z and some of the trends he's observing. And we have some hot new products coming your way, including some courses. So stay tuned to xyzuniversity.com. I'm Sarah Sladek, your host. Thanks for tuning in.
thank you. All right.